Well, hi there. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at Module 69, which gives you kind of a introduction to factor markets and kind of the demand for factors of production and things like that. So it gives you kind of the basics of marginal revenue product and that kind of thing. So the check your understanding number one gives you a scenario where it says, suppose the government places a price control in the market for professors of college, imposing a wage that is lower than the market wage. So it's a price ceiling on their wages, which is a little weird, but whatever. Describe the effect of this policy on the production of college degrees. What sectors would it adversely affect and who would it benefit? So in terms of thinking about on the production of college degrees, if the wage of the professors is limited, then we would say that limits the capacity, right? That limits capacity and therefore reduces output. So any of that kind of thing, if you were to kind of limit the wage, then it's going to send some people over, so sends some elsewhere. And that's kind of the explanation that you can rely on here, is to say if you had that sort of cap, it would send some of those professors somewhere else looking for a different job, and that would therefore limit the capacity of the universities, which would decrease the output of college degrees. The second two parts are adverse. We could say, adverse would be the sectors like college towns, right? If you think about a college town, it's going to have certain things that depend basically on the university for its functioning. And so if there's smaller numbers of students, there's smaller numbers of professors, then the college towns would be adversely affected. And we would also say any firm relying on college graduates, relying on grads, because if you're thinking about like, hey, I want to hire a college graduate, well, now there's fewer of them, so they're more expensive. And so they're pricier to hire them, so that would be bad. You could also just say broadly, the U.S. economy would suffer because human capital is really dependent upon worker training, right? And so if you don't have education in terms of college education for as many people, that harms human capital, and so it slows growth rates for everybody. Benefits, it would benefit the firms who hire former professors. So like the professors who left their jobs, well, they're going to go take jobs somewhere else, probably in the private sector. And in those circumstances, the private sector wouldn't have to pay them as much. They could say, well, we're paying you better than the wage limit that you would receive at the college, so you're doing okay with that kind of thing. So let's take a look at number two. Number two says, suppose service industries such as retail and banking experience an increase in demand. These services use labor, obviously. Does the demand curve for labor shift to the right, left, or remain unchanged? So for that one, for A, demand for labor would increase, and that's just because and it doesn't ask for this, but it's because the marginal revenue product increases. And that's because the price of the underlying product increased. So if there's an increase in demand for the product, then that's going to drive up the price of that product, which drives up the marginal revenue product of each individual worker, and that's actually the demand for labor. B says, suppose diminishing fish populations off the coast of Maine lead to policies restricting the use of most productive types of nets in the area, so productivity goes down. The result is a decrease in the number of fish caught per day by commercial fishers. The price is unaffected. Does the demand for fishers shift the left, right, or remain unchanged? For this one, the demand for labor falls because the MRP falls, and the underlying thing here is the marginal product, right? So we've already defined MRP in one of the lectures as the marginal product times the price. And in this case, it's saying, hey, they're not as productive anymore, so it's going to drive down the MRP, which is the demand for labor. Okay, let's take a look at these multiple choice questions. Some of these will appear on the quiz, so it'd be good to get the good answers for them. Which of the following is an example of physical capital as opposed to, say, human capital, which is kind of training, right? So human capital is a word that I didn't really talk about in the lecture, but it's a word that just means like the training, the quality of your workforce. Physical capital would be like the machinery, so B, welding equipment. That will appear on the quiz. Number two, which of the following can shift the factor demand curve to the right? And we know that factor demand is the same as MRP. So it's a lot of the same thing. Right? It's demand for labor. So it's either the marginal product or the price. And it says increase in the price. Yes, that would do it. An increase in the marginal product. Yes, that would do it. And 3 is a technological advance. And that's a curveball, but it's the same thing as saying an increase in marginal productivity. If there's an increase in technological capacity, it changes your productivity and it makes it better. So we would say E, all of the above. Number 3, factor demand is called derived demand because it comes from the demand for the underlying product. So which one of those answers go with that? Derived from the productivity workers? No. Derived from market wage? No. Derived from product market? D. Number 4. What factor receives the largest portion of income? So this is not going to appear on the quiz. It's labor. Labor receives about 65% of the income. Like if you were to calculate how much income does labor versus machinery versus land get, labor is overwhelmingly the largest there. B. It's been a declining share for the last several years, but the individual firm's demand for labor is, and this is the book here, this version of the book calls it value of marginal product of labor. It's better just to call it the marginal revenue product, the MRP, and that's what we're using. So if you're using the paper copy of the textbook, it refers to it as the MRP, and that's what we're going to see on the quiz. So it's A, but with the note, that's the MRP rather than VMP. VMPL is made up, right? That's what it is. So it's the VMPL or the MRP. It's not equal to the marginal product of labor, right? The marginal product is different from the marginal revenue product. That's like, the marginal product versus the marginal revenue product, the value of those things. Last one says, draw a separate correctly labeled graph illustrating the effect of each of the following changes on the demand for labor. Ceteris paribus assumption, all else equal, blah, blah, blah. Number 2, so A says the price of the product being produced decreases. So the effect would be a decrease in the demand for the workers, right? So shift in, D1. So that's 1. 2 is worker productivity increases. So if their productivity increases, then that's going to increase the demand. Shift to the right. Again, these are just testing, like, do you know that marginal product times the price is equal to marginal revenue product? And each of these curves is just the MRP. And then I'll do the third one kind of below because it's a little harder to see here. Number 2, 3, wage, quantity of labor. It says firms invest in more capital to be used by the workers. So that means each worker has more machinery, which means that they're more productive. And so we would say increase D to D1. All right, bada bing, bada boom. Hopefully that helped you. See you next time.